So we're gonna wait for these guys. Are there any Bitcoin, like relative Bitcoin noobs here, like the past year or something? You can see hands. So mostly veterans, which I'd love to hear. All right, of the new people, do you have any questions about Bitcoin? I know you do, but do you have a question about Bitcoin that you're willing to ask in front of an audience? Okay, no, that's it. Thank you. Nobody's helping me out. I'm just going to sit and say this. All right, well. Oh, yeah.
I've got one.
Two.
I'm fairly new to Bitcoin. Just theoretically, if you're 24 years old, what percentage of your net
Asking for a
worth?
friend.
What percentage of your net worth would you put into Bitcoin?
Oh, I mean,
Theoretically.
100%. I mean, that's the only right answer in my opinion. 24. You can't imagine. Like I would be scared shitless to be holding fiat at all, especially when you're that young. Because if you're looking to save for 10, 20 years, I don't know if the dollar's going to be around. Like seriously, the dollar might fail in the next couple decades. So better hold some Bitcoin. Yeah.
So if you were buying a house right now, would you put a lot down, or would you put as little as you possibly can and put the rest? I know this is probably a loaded question.
Not a loaded question.
In Bitcoin.
Cheap, leveraged Bitcoin. There you go. So yes, the answer is yes. Get a loan for. Hey guys.
I'm in real
Get a
estate
loan
right
for 3%
now.
or
Smallest
2% to buy
amount.
Bitcoin.
Smallest amount.
You'll make more money by putting the rest of it by yourself.
It's good to see you. Yeah. How's it going? All right, so this is impromptu right here, so that I can, actually show my slide deck that I worked so hard on. Which I haven't done for a long time. This is Untapped Growth. What's up, everybody? Who knows Untapped Growth? It's going to go down in the history books, leading the front lines of sort of the agricultural and sustainable living revolution that on top of Bitcoin. And this is Aleks. You guys know Aleks, who spoke this morning, right?
I did. I opened this morning.
That's right. Well, I brought you. Aleks is founder CEO of Amber app, which is coming to the US, launched in Australia. Been around in Bitcoin for a long time. Also produces incredible content on podcasts and also written content at Bitcoin Times that he writes for and edits. It's some of the best Bitcoin content out there, so it's awesome writing. So guys, this is gonna be fun.
Yes, guys, just went back to the
Yeah, here we go. So I hear on the grapevine that you are looking at putting together some kind of citadel, meshtadel. I don't even know what that means. So I want to know what a meshtadel is, and I want to hear, the summary of your plan, not the 8-hour version, because we don't have time for that. But I do want to do that at some point.
So Val was asking this question on a podcast right before, guys, with me. We were wanting to chat.
Yeah.
I went on a 2-hour monologue. It's like there's so many frames you have to answer. You just have to landscape for it.
Go.
Okay.
I'll just take a seat.
We live in a world where they're trying to use Malthusian fear spells to create a forever war to herd the population into a place where they can maintain control. Okay. They're using that to consolidate a destruction of human free will beneath a system that puts that choice on top with this AI communist control like paradigm, right? So this is what they're using the ESG narrative to do. This is what they're doing with these different pandemic narratives. They started with planting the narrative using the medical side, right, with this health and viral pandemic. Now they're moving towards the environmentalism pandemic and the cyber pandemic, right? Trying to herd the populace into a place that it's a permissioned economy for everything anybody touches. So if you want to zoom out and see where our current landscape is from a bigger picture, this is monetary reset, right? they're trying to, like they always do at the long cycle, consolidate all the productive capital into one location, extract wealth from the economy, secure a cornerstone where they have a forever monopoly of the next phase of civilization, and use the money printer like they've always done to extract human time, right? That way, it's like a hidden enslavement of humanity, right?
Yeah, all right, let's pause there for a second, because that's a big concept. That money is a mechanism by which to enslave humanity and steal time. All right, so this is like a sentence that a lot of Bitcoiners wouldn't bat an eye at. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I get it. Because we, read and talked about and discussed this idea at length. There's a couple cornerstone pieces here. I think. What's the title of Breedlove's piece on this?
Masters and Slaves.
Masters and Slaves of Money. He dives deep. Robert Breedlove dives deep in Masters and Slaves of Money on
Really good
this
piece.
idea, sort of the foundational piece of time theft, and the idea being inflation is, in essence, stealing your time. So if you are working for money that's of a certain value at this point in the timeline, and then the value of that money is 50% less at this point in the timeline, then you have lost 50% of the time you originally spent earning that value. Okay, so it's literally stealing your time, and he goes into great detail about the Egyptian civilization and the building of the pyramids and how much time theft went into building that pyramid, right? And then relates it literal time theft because it was slavery, direct time theft, and then he relates that to inflation, which is sort of this indirect, insidious, you're talking about, way to steal people's time.
Yep. Okay, so try to frame the big picture, then I'll get into why I'm doing what I'm doing to solve it. So, what I believe is happening is they're trying to push everything using first this pandemic narrative and then this whole ESG narrative. So ESG, environmental social governance, right? They're trying to misframe the problem around this Malthusianism so that everything has to have this check mark in order for it to go to survive, okay? So I believe what they're going to do is try to create this SDR system to bootstrap the emergence of the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, and then build on top of that a permissioned economy. So what that permissioned economy will do is allow them to extract all the productive capital at will from the top and allow anybody trying to move against that in the decentralized marketplace to get choked out by whatever regulatory or narrative thing they want to do to crush it. So what do we do about that, right? Okay, so I think they completely, on the macro scale timeline of this whole event, missed Bitcoin. And Satoshi gave us this cornerstone that's going to enable a decentralized revolution. That is the one reason we stand a chance of winning, right? Because anything we try to do, it just gets psyoped and then consolidates more power for those who are trying to destroy human freedom and flourishing, right? So, my thesis is that the plebs of Bitcoin are Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's a tool, it's a monetary and software tool that we use as a governance for human consensus, right? So Bitcoin is going to defund the money printer, which is the cornerstone from which ultimate manipulation can take place. They use that to drive the incentives at scale. I mean, you can see it right now in the United States where with the states, with the hospitals, with the farms, everything is driven by hidden subsidies. And if you're in a marketplace, you know your one little market to know just how bad it is and corrupts the decision making. But it's everywhere and it's very insidious because it's this hidden manipulation at scale, right? So when Bitcoin takes away that power to use time theft to direct incentives in a hidden communist centralized manner, that's going to flip everything to ground it back to reality again and produce real value repairage, which is going to go back to humans working together based upon whatever's most efficient. So Bitcoin energy currency. I mean, Svetsky and I can talk about that for weeks. But so my thesis is, if we want to shepherd Bitcoin through winning the war, because Bitcoin is the tool that's going to defund the system at the macro scale, because it's a pressure release valve from that whole goal. Because the assumption that would make that communist system work is believing that they can pressure cap all the energy into places they control and then extract the energy through a channel that they maintain power over. Bitcoin, due to being this decentralized, censorship-resistant monetary tool, it is a direct little chink in that pressure box that's not going to be able to be destroyed like that. So because of that, it's going to cripple everything they're doing. It's that one assumption they made that I can control everything. Well, you can't. Freedom came back and punched back, and it's going to win. I mean, organic systems aren't machines, right? Humanity is an organic system. So my thesis is, if we want to shepherd Bitcoin through hyper-Bitcoinization to win the war, we must protect the plebs, because the plebs are Bitcoin. The plebs are those using Bitcoin. And that's where this whole thing of like the Citadel Revolution comes from. It's like, how do we live in this world, where there's this tension against human free will and collaboration, that we can live in the gray zones until Bitcoin's successful enough to let us kind of, the phoenix rise from the ashes on the other side of a healthy, flourishing society of humanity.
Yeah.
So that's the framing of the problem. Do you want to talk about that a little before we talk about what I'm actually doing?
No, that's great.
I have a question.
Yes.
Who's they?
I was just going to ask that question. So,
Everybody asks that.
everyone's thinking that, right? Who's they? Who's doing the psyop? So, Alex, here's how I'm going to frame it. Is there a they? Or, let me put it this way. Does there have to be a they? Or does the fiat system, or just the very fundamental nature of fiat money, force this sort of situation upon humanity?
Yeah. So I think your answer is then. So can everyone hear me from the back? No? Okay. So yeah, I always, so we when we did the big podcast between me, you, Laser, Mark Moss, and everything, it was
I
quite
wish
fun.
Laser was here. He answers that question so well.
I don't think he does.
You don't
I
like
think
it?
he does. No, I think he's got a shit answer to it.
This is why I wish he was here.
Yeah.
You guys are butt heads over it. Real healthy.
It's impossible to have a day. Like the idea that there is a cabal of lizards somewhere that are like, you know, running the show, I think is really it overestimates the what's the word, the competence of a group of people and their capacity to run stuff. Has anyone ever tried to get like 5 people to decide on fucking dinner? It's impossible. Fucking impossible. Like, it doesn't work. So, like, trying to, you know, do this on a grand scale is almost impossible. Like, it doesn't work. So the way I like to frame it in terms of why we are here is, I just say, if anyone saw my talk in the morning, like when you remove consequence from human action, from behavior, you actually do really dumb things. And when you do really dumb things and you don't know that they're dumb, they lead to even more dumb things. And by the time you do something that's right, the feedback loop's not there, so you don't know what you've done is right, and then you think that...
Chase it further.
Exactly, so you do something right, but you get a bad result, and you're like, oh fuck, no, that was dumb. So then you end up doing a bunch of other bad things. So basically everyone's doing dumb, bad, blind things, and nobody actually has any fucking clue. And what you get is, you layer that with the natural tendency of human beings and the groups they form to make the most of a situation, right? Like we all do that. It's a biological need. That is actually what, I mean, fundamentally, existence, life, survival is about taking what you have and making the most of it, because we actually live in a paradigm of fixed resources, fixed time, fixed energy, right? So you have scarcity. So you need to make the most of what you have. So when all the signal is broken, when all of the behavior is retarded, when you don't know that the behavior is retarded, you try and take what advantage you can in every way. And that's why, like, you know, you look at the Silicon Valley is a great example of this. It's like you've got genuinely talented people who go out there and they build dick pic apps, and they think they're doing something good for the world, or they create the next, you know, fucking gambling app, and you know they're putting basically lipstick on a pig. And they think
Coinbase app?
Yeah, Coinbase, all that kind of shit, Robinhood, PayPal, fucking you name it. Like all of that crap, it doesn't actually solve a problem. Like, you know, I mean, DeFi is an even better example, or fucking NFT, like all of that kind of stuff. It's like, let's sell overpriced JPEGs and it's innovation, right? Like, it's always funny to watch. Like, I met this Ethereum guy in at Bitcoin 2021. I was at some like after party thing, and he's there, and we start having this conversation, and we agree about the guns, we agree about like the scamdemic, we agree about all this stuff, and then he's like, I start saying how Bitcoin defunds the parasites, so it realigns human behavior in a way that if you're doing something dumb, and there's a consequence. And he's like, you're a Bitcoin maximalist, aren't you? I said, no. I said, I'm a Bitcoin supremacist. I said, I maximalist. I ate maximalist for breakfast, so I was he's like, I'm one of the founders of Ethereum. I said, and his girlfriend was there. I said, you should divorce this fucker. I was like, we got into the whole conversation. I started asking him, I was like, so tell me, why Ethereum? He's like, we need to enable like, people so they can trade amongst each other in a decentralized way. I was like, okay, so why? He's like, because like, people need to like, we need tokens and we need to represent stuff. And I'm like, okay, so why? And he's like, NFTs and stuff, we need to, I was like, why? And like, the thing is, they can't fucking answer the question, right? So they're just innovating for the sake of innovating. And this is, again, it might seem like there's a grand plan, like, I would argue ESG is also like people, I mean, just because there doesn't need to be, so this is going to be a counterpoint, just because there doesn't need to be a conspiracy to explain the shitstorm that we're in, doesn't mean that there isn't people conspiring, right? Like, we all are conspiring as well. We're all conspiring to make Bitcoin successful. Like, we're all going out there and fucking...
For free.
Exactly. But exactly, so we have a reason though, but we're all conspiring for something. So conspiracies are always at play. The question is, which conspiracy is the most effective and uses the incentive structure to the greatest, to the greatest degree or to the highest advantage. That's really what the question is. And at the moment, shit's so fucking retarded that we're getting what we're getting.
So I agree with you.
I would just say, boil that down. They is the aggregate of our worst impulses. We don't have records.
Totally. So there's no lizards. Basically, it's all of us.
Any quick catch that? Can you repeat that? I said that they is the aggregate of all of our worst impulses when incentives are.
Okay, so it's an emergent property of mismanagement.
Yes.
Totally.
Okay. And it relies on the fundamental incentives of what's driving that society, right? Money's foundation of civilization, or one of the most important foundations of civilization, is the base layer of providing incentives for humanity to operate and make decisions and like communicate those decisions to other people. So if you have a broken incentive structure, you're going to do dumb shit. It's like Alex was saying, right? But if you have a proper, true incentive system that's built on something that's real, true, and not going to change over time, trustworthy, then you have a society that's going to make better decisions and be more truthful and be more honest and think longer term.
So I would have totally agreed with you until just recently that like that was true. Until I read some things that were actually written in the 1970s. And it was so accurate and tied into what was happening when we left the gold standard and what the evolution of like society from the world wars to what's happening now with the pandemics and all that, that it kind of just blew my mind that like there are things that are trying to pull conspiracies. But I agree, like it's mostly incompetence, but it doesn't take that much incompetence with a little bit of incentive manipulation to drive the incompetence energy a certain direction, right? So, like you think about like the Federal Reserve, it's owned by private entities. Like, how does that all work? Because you think about money. Money is a communication tool. It's how we communicate with each other about desire and energy. Who's most efficient to fulfill these desires? When you manipulate money, you're manipulating what the marketplace of people are saying they want and what the marketplace is saying how it should be solved based upon what's most efficient. When you corrupt that, you can really bump things with just minimal effort because it's a huge leverage point.
Yeah, but you don't even have to. Like the idea that, I mean, does anyone know like Brandon? You know, like let's go Brandon. Obviously everyone knows it, but that's a perfect example of no one can predict that shit. But that's like an emergent phenomenon of one of these things, right? So, are you by any chance talking about Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World Revisited, or no?
No.
Okay, so he fucking nails it there as well. So if anyone's ever read Brave New World, check out Brave New World Revisited, which is, he comes back 30 years later and writes a series of essays that looks at his book and 1948 after World War II. And it's a really good book. And he basically outlines everything. His conclusion is a little bit, iffy towards the end about, democracy, but anyway, like, he didn't have Bitcoin at the time, so that's forgivable. But he does make the case for a they, a more cohesive they.
I don't think it's a cohesive day. I wouldn't agree with that at all.
Okay, cool.
There's people competing to manipulate incentives through control of these private manipulation entities, like the control of currencies.
Correct. So here's how I'll like. Did anyone ever read like the Remnant, the Bitcoin the Remnant article? Yeah. Okay, a few people. All right. So there's a new one that I'm putting together, which I'm trying to like break out the archetypes of people, which might give us some color to this discussion. And it's called the Remnant, the Masses, and the Parasites. So it's basically the three archetypes, very broadly speaking. And the idea is that the Remnant are people who are productive. They're the sort of the 20% who produce the 80%, right? Like Pareto distributions exist all over the world, all over the universe, in fact. So you've got the sort of the Remnant, and that archetype of people is generally like you'll find that in the Bitcoin community a lot of the time. Then you have sort of the masses, which are the sheeple, the people who are just basically, they represent inertia, right? Like, so if the Remnant is the initiating force, the masses are the inertia that comes behind it. And unless the initiating force changes direction, the inertia just goes into whatever fucking direction was set in the first place, right? So I always say like, if Bitcoiners don't exist and if we don't like fix the money, the sheeple will go right into the gulags with a fucking smile on their face because they'll be happy owning nothing, right? Like, we get the, what was like that fucking world coin, right? The orb,
How is that not a joke?
I know, right? It's fucking real, but there you go, innovation.
Sorry.
But what I didn't articulate well in the first article, which I'm going to articulate in the second piece, when I go into the psyche of the Remnant, the Masses, and this parasite, is that there is a third archetype, which is the kind of archetype of human that is either a failed remnant or a member of the jealous masses, which is, I was out-competed in the marketplace by other people. So as a result, instead of getting up and doing something better, making myself better, I will create machinations, whatever the fuck that word is. Like I'll create mechanisms to leech from the remnant. And the best way to do that is to make the masses feel jealous about them and to represent the masses in some way. So basically you weaponize the sheep and you steal from the productive people. So what you've got is, you've got a conspiracy of the remnant, which is, my conspiracy is I want to make the fucking best version of myself and the people I care about, and I want to actually produce some wealth. I want to live a better life. I want to do better things in my life. So that's my conspiracy.
And create a world of freedom where justice and incentives are real, so the sheep have friction to become their best self too.
I only want to do that insofar as that world enables me to be a better version of myself.
Okay.
So that's why I want to do it.
This is where Bitcoin's interesting, right? Because it's completely driven off your own selfish interest.
Totally.
But it has this virgin property of benefiting, as you're saying, everyone.
Yeah, but I'm not doing it to benefit anyone else.
Right.
I'm doing it because I want to live in a world in which when I perform work, I don't have some fucking leech taking it from me. I just don't want that because, and I don't actually care about the masses. Like, they can do whatever the fuck they want. If they want to jump off the fucking cliff and if they want to fucking wear hazmat suits to go fucking to the toilet or whatever, they can fucking do whatever they want. Just don't fucking tell me what to do. So it's like the remnant is conspiring to live their best version.
Last 2 years have really triggered
Just a little bit. The masses, I don't know what the fuck they're conspiring. Like there's this old saying I used to use when I was doing talks about entrepreneurship that I said there's 3 types of people. There's those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what the fuck happened. So it's like the masses are generally the last thing, right? But then you have the parasites, and they're conspiring on how do we leech from this and use numbers to our advantage.
Yeah.
And that's the competing conspiracies. And the problem is, to date, our conspiracy, the conspiracy of the productive individual, has been outcompeted by the conspiracy of the parasite because the incentives are skewed the wrong way.
Due to the control of the money.
Correct. So now, like, we can.
So our only like friction there is believing that these private institutions that control the incentives of the money, how much like can they get away with by doing that?
They can get away with heaps, but here's the thing: the private institutions are empowered by the public institutions that exist. So that's how they've used the masses to empower themselves to do that. So if they were purely private institutions, I'd be fucking sweet. I'd be happy, whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But the fact that they've used the public veil as a layer of credibility, that is where the problem is.
Not just
Remove the
layer
public,
credibility, it's enforcement. You know, it's an enforcement of the monopolization. Like if you had like private bank money like existed in the 19th century for quite a long time, you know, like I would say probably 6 decades out of the 19th century, was mostly like private bank money, right? Just completely competing on the open market for use. And if you had that happening now, there'd be no single dominant corporation issuing money that people would use, right? I mean, it just wouldn't happen in the market. But you know, government comes in and says, all right, we're going to create this thing called the Federal Reserve Bank, and you know, we're going to like maintain a little control over it, but it has these member banks that are private institutions structured like a corporation. Dividends have to go to the treasury and all that. So it is like this weird creature of public-private, like, you know, mashup, and it results in a monopoly over the control of the money by the government. So that's like the root. If you go back and come to my talk this afternoon, and we're going to go through a couple of historical examples about how this has all played out before, and it's, you know what will happen. What's up, CJ?
I'm going to throw a complete softball for you guys, but I think there's a lot of people in the room that are still looking at this conversation skeptically. You might not think this is real, but it is real, and it doesn't just happen on the financial side. If anybody's ever tried to do construction, there's an architectural review board, which is basically a bunch of washed up, failed architects who don't know how to fucking build anything, and they're going to penalize you for wanting to put in a skylight, not having, you know, biodegradable bike racks or whatever. And that is a perfect example of a real life thing that's happening, and it happens in every institution. We're just happening to be so far ahead of them in the financial sense because of Bitcoin. But you know, where this all goes in the future is emerging with all these things where we take our own sovereignty back because we don't allow them to penalize us for being creative leaders, builders, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, same thing in agriculture, right? Where you have this false legitimacy through this control of the public sphere to give energy to both this media narrative they create, but also the regulatory pushes. So like, say cattle ranching. They've consolidated all the power into these mega processing industries where there's only 4 in the whole country. They're able to essentially short sell the cattle producers, increase the price of the meat because they're monopolized, and maintain control of the whole marketplace. And then they're driving this ESG narrative of cattle bad, even though cows, when managed appropriately, are the biggest soil builders for restoring environments we possibly could ever have, right? So, like cows are kind of like the Bitcoin of food, right? They're the one food source that can't be debased. Like, I don't know if you know this. Like chickens and pigs, they have the fatty acid profile of whatever food they eat. Cows produce the healthy saturated fats and the fat profiles that are good for humans no matter what you feed them, up until you destroy their genetics and feed them so much junk that like it just pretty much kills the animals. We're crap with a lot of modern cows today. And so like cows are one of the few parts of the food chain where you don't need outside inputs for sovereignty. the sunshine, rain, have good healthy genetic animals, throw them out on the scrub brush, you can build soil, have a productive future for tomorrow, and have food for today, right? So you look at this push against sovereignty happening. They're starting to push this whole methane thing, where like you have to pay a methane tax if you have cows.
But not fun.
Yeah, and so now they're trying to push towards this whole like anti-meat agenda, which is using this public thing to try to force the control of your input for civilization into something they can centralize, because you can't centralize cattle, okay? So those things are trying to push with this ESG narrative enough to drive most farms out of business. I mean, granted, they already all are going out of business, some of these small family farms, due to the monetization of land and the current already regulatory monopolized processing environment. So my thesis is that, I mean, whether you like your Moral and Svetsky side of this is a compilation of human stupidity all coming together, or there's incentive manipulation through the currency happening at scale that kind of guides that energy of the stupidity happening, that the solution's the same. We need to opt out into total sovereignty of everything, starting first with your money, because that's the energy of your life force that you're storing to be able to have productive potential and optionality later, but also for all of your inputs to life and value creation, whether that means like manufacturing and supply chains going into whatever we're building. But I mean, first and foremost, we need the soil. The soil is your first productive asset. Until you have an overproduction of food, there can be no civilization because there can be no division of labor. Division of labor only happens once you don't have to have everybody farming. It's that path dependency of the emergence of new civilizations, right? Which is why I started first with like, I want to work on citadels of the emergent new Bitcoiner world of smaller sovereign units, where the family unit is what has the power again, right? So like the first place to start, we need sovereign food chains. But eventually that extends to everything, and until we have enough control of everything, this manipulation of monetary incentives and regulatory authority from these public entities that can control all that is going to try to make freedom impossible and make every place where you can have sovereignty get consolidated into something that's centralizable. So Meshtadels. Meshtadels is understanding that game and staying beneath the surface and building trust networks with like just people in the community where they're working on one thing and you're working on one thing, and you can support each other as you try to maintain sovereignty in a world that's trying to centralize to keep you from having it. What I'm doing is, I wouldn't advise anybody doing it and building out in the open like I am. Because now it's like you're picking a fight between the centralizing agenda or the agenda of human freedom, and that's going to put you right in the cusp of earning that headbutting. I'm doing it for a reason of trying to use that to rally support for helping build the underground network of like the Meshtadel, of Bitcoiners doing this on their like own little small homesteads, or Bitcoiners doing this trying to get into 3D printing and manufacturing, even if not just like the guys doing like guns and stuff, but guys doing like actual productive machinery using these more flexible manufacturing practices. And there's Bitcoiners out there solving so many problems. We gotta be able to find each other and connect, right? And that end, be out here telling the story of here's who we are and why it's beautiful and good. Because a lot of the like all power for a governmental authority with this public narrative to assert itself comes ultimately from the consent of the governed. You can obfuscate that all you want, but if people stop believing you, whether legal or kinetic enforcement, it stops working. It's only through the will of enough people being on your side, right? Which is where this control of the media and the narrative is such a big deal. If we, and I love how this is already happening in the Bitcoin community, if you can unveil the beauty of communities adherent to truth and why freedom and sovereignty matter, it breaks the lies and breaks the energy of the consent of the governed. And if you can do that at scale enough, of enough people collaborating, it'll flip the whole game. Because once you get the incentive squared where you can store human energy and money better again, and then you flip the story we're living together, first beneath the surface with the Meshtadels of these hidden trust networks of people producing real value. That way, like, they don't get attacked by the centralizing forces and agenda out there and let them survive under the surface. But the real battle is going to be won as Bitcoin enables the incentives to be free again rather than manipulated, and then it's just storytelling. It's here's why freedom and all this is good compared to the lie of like beef bad, it destroys the environment, right? or whatever realm you want to talk about.
The storytelling part's fun. So,
Yeah, I have a question for all of you. So, my family's like communism, and they came here for the American dream. So I have this big thing about where I see our country going right now is sort of the American dream's been hijacked, and we confuse, I think, capitalism for cronyism. That has a lot to do with, what the government's doing. And so, as someone who worked in the media, I felt like all of a sudden things were becoming, the news was becoming a mouthpiece for the government, right? They should be watchdogs, but instead they were a mouthpiece and propaganda for the government, which I was frustrated about. So I want to know, because when I was younger, I felt like I didn't even know what political party people were. I mean, people voted, but it wasn't this like, you're this or this, and that's it. Now we have cancel culture, and people are afraid to share their opinions in newsrooms, and where do you think the biggest shift happened, where we went to this place where now people are idol-worshiping politicians? And from here, the pandemic, I think, exacerbated the problem, but where did the biggest shift happen, in your opinion?
1971.
Inclusivity.
So, like, I would define that as safe space maximum, right? Where it's like, everybody's got to get along. And where that flows from, it's pure fiat. Because fiat's the world where if you're closer to those who are manipulating the communication mechanism of value, then you profit and rise up with them and are a part of the extraction of wealth from the productive class, the 20% of the remnant, right? So fiat created this entire world where it's about the art of the pander. It's about let me get closest to those who have this ability to steal from everybody without anybody realizing it. So it's all about like, let me just pretend that we're getting along and keep you happy, and I can't rock the boat because we're not grounded on truth of like an energy currency of this is reality of what's efficient communication, of this is what's wanted in the market, and this is who's suited to do it best. It's who's got control of the guy who's telling us what the market wants.
Yeah, so that's one of the emerging factors. Do you want to say something quick?
I want to piggyback on something you guys were talking about earlier. We were talking about what's the conspiracy. And you mentioned that the conspiracy was like some of these private entities were competing on the market to make these outcomes happen. And to answer her question, from my opinion, it would be when these private social media entities started creating these algorithms that started routing people into intent and these creating these echo chambers for them to benefit commercially off of everybody thinking alike and being able to sell their products.
So to that, like, I had a really good conversation with Jack one-on-one when I caught up with him a couple of months ago about Twitter. So I'll mention something that's real about that in a second. But what I was going to say, my answer before about inclusivity. So this is the dumb version. This is like the emergent version of why everyone fucking hates each other at the moment. Is because it sounds really nice to say to people that we should all get along. You know, that's cute, you know. But what happens when you get two people who just don't get along and you tell them that they should get along? What happens underneath the surface? Fucking resentment breeds. And like I use this example about kids in school. What do kids in school do? They form groups with their own friends. They don't all get along. They tease each other, beat each other up and everything, but they fucking grow up, right? And they become adults and they mature out of it, etc. But, you know, you don't... Sorry?
There is training that these two people that don't get along, you tie them physically together. And until they can get along, they'll stay that way.
That's also a very dangerous place to be, and that is
well, that's called a gulag as well.
The political correctness is to get along.
Yeah.
And that is a dangerous, I've been in foster care and adoption for years and years and years, and the most dangerous place you can have children is a society or a situation where there's not transparency. And one of the most wonderful things about Bitcoin, and the reason it's safe, is because there is transparency. And so that whole get along crap, and people not being, I want a racist asshole to tell me he's racist. Because then I know my child is safe.
That's it. Thank you. So I had a big argument with someone about this. I said, racism is actually a good thing. So before I get stabbed by someone, hear me out.
Don't tweet it yet.
Here's why it's good. Which is basically what you just said, is that why should someone who doesn't like someone for such a stupid idea of like fucking skin color, right? Like, why should that person be forced to sell a product to that person because they should be nice to them? All it does is it does a disservice to both parties. It does a disservice to the party that is being, vilified because of their race, because this one is like giving the other person money, giving money to a person who doesn't fucking like them in the first place. It's like, go spend your money somewhere, with someone who actually appreciates you. And the other person, if they're going to lower their standards to the point of judging a person just by their fucking skin color instead of as an individual, then that person should go out of business because this person is not spending money there. But what we do is we've placated everyone into this idea that we should all just get along, everyone's the same, we're all in this together, no we're not, fuck you, I like some people, I don't like other people, if I don't like you, get the fuck out of my face. Like, being selective is actually a good thing. And that's what we've lost. So instead of having tribes that are homogenous on the inside, but heterogeneous on the outside, we've got this attempt at creating a fucking blob of humanity where we're all supposed to think the same, do the same, smell the same, fart the same. Like, we're supposed to do everything the same. And it's fucked up. Like, life needs diversity. So diversity is actually in stark contrast with inclusivity. They don't mesh very well. So, and that's why, like, again, these crazy lefties, they just literally, they say one thing, they say another, and the things don't actually work together.
It's crazy. I teach at USC, I teach communication, and so students under me are making newscasts, and they put trigger warnings, you guys, on them. On the student newscast, there's like a page that comes up, trigger warning for anyone that's like going to be sensitive. And
can I speak there?
Scroll.
You just gotta go on with a t-shirt, warning, offensive.
Which one is it?
I mean, because
Yeah, you need to design a trigger warning.
Because what it does is like it suppresses volatility, thinking false peace is good, and it's just flat
Everything
wrong.
blows up. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just catastrophic when it explodes. Versus having healthy friction on the front side for it to be real.
They believe that they can create predicted results.
Yeah.
But they then can build a system on top.
Yes,
And that's what I said in the morning,
hubris.
right? Yeah, that's what I said in the morning, right? It's like but by lying to ourselves for so long, we've come to the point where we believe the models that we've created actually represent reality, not reality itself. So it's like, okay, so if we just change this variable in the model, then that must change reality. It's like, no, dickhead. Reality is telling you something different, but then we're like, la 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 la, print money, it'll be okay. And it's like just continuing to lie to ourselves. It's such a scam.
nothing new under the sun. It means the Tower of Babel all over again. I mean, that's what I'd say Keynesianism is. It's like attempting to say that the world's a machine, we know enough to control the variables, and we can play God. And at the expense of integrating to truth itself, of allowing that friction of working itself into a natural place of equilibrium.
Question?
Well, I was looking forward to Brady's talk, but this is fantastic. I'm glad that didn't work. I was just wondering, how long do you guys think it comes to a head that, you know, Bitcoin was in the underground for, we could say, until now, and that the two systems kind of collide, or as Saylor said the other day, that he doesn't want this current system to completely collapse, but to save it, or that Bitcoin would save it. So when do you see that transition, or people waking up to the current situation? Because this is still a very small crowd here.
I mean, it's happening now. It started in 2009. So, I mean, we have been waking up by orders of magnitude, you know, every roughly 4 years with the price hype cycle. I don't think that hype cycle is going to continue for various reasons, but I think we'll have shorter kind of price spikes and cycles, and people will be coming in much faster. So, you know, you're on the adoption curve, where at the beginning of that asymptotic growth curve, where we're going to go from 1%, 2% early adopters to 80%, you know, worldwide use rate. And it depends on how these, you governments, how these nations respond to Bitcoin. If you embrace Bitcoin, this is a fascinating game theory. If you embrace Bitcoin, you'll be well positioned in this new economy that is being built right now. And if you fight it, then you're going to lose your standing, right? So if the U.S. has the most entrenched interest in the global economy as it exists now, being global reserve currency, so would be incentivized to, fight Bitcoin, right? But we have this opposing force, this sort of tradition in this country of, where it did come from, it still persists, this freedom-seeking, capitalist, free market ideology still exists here. And we're seeing it go into politics in this country. And CJ, who is sitting here, is working with Jimmy Song and Amanda Cavallari and some other great Bitcoiners to make this Bitcoin Today coalition. They're going and talking to people in Congress, and you see more and more politicians popping in and supporting Bitcoin. So that incentive structure and that game theory works within this country as well as on the national stage, just like the Cantillon effects works within this country as well as the international stage. So the U.S. could, it's legal to own Bitcoin here, and I don't think it's ever going to change as property. I think if the U.S. government decides to make Bitcoin legal tender sometime in the next decade, then that's the smartest thing America could do, And it might happen. It might happen with, Bitcoiners, trying to work within the system and make it happen.
So you guys might think I'm crazy for saying it's this short of a time scale, but if you look at the big picture strategy, you've got this world that's trying to centralize, and then the emergent world that's trying to decentralize with sovereignty more at the base layer of humanity, right? If you look at the few places that's most critical, you've got the energy and you've got the food supply. They're currently trying to cut off gas lines and things in the U.S. to have more control over centralized energy supply chains. And they're currently driving huge on this anti-meat agenda, trying to centralize into this fake meat and all this bullshit with these mega monocropping farms that are vegetarian, whatever.
Beyond meat.
It's insane. Okay, if you look at the time scale in the real world with that, I see the clash peaking in 6 to 18 months. That's going to be those two worlds colliding, boots on the ground. When that collides, Bitcoin is going to all of a sudden be thrust on the stage. It's that one point where the battle's happening. Yeah. It's going to be surrounded with chaos and surrounded with all these narratives competing, but it's going to put Bitcoin right in the middle of everything, because the people on the decentralized team are going to be realizing Bitcoin's the one thing that matters for shepherding us through. And the people pushing the centralized agenda, you see it too with the Bitcoiners and the mining integrated into the oil and gas industry. You see it with the Bitcoiners awakening on the regenerative agriculture industry. So those two worlds are getting more divisive. They're going to start colliding. So what I would say with that, start being really conscientious to secure your sovereignty of things in your life, not just in your money. That way we can weather the storm as it collides to keep supporting Bitcoin until it helps their decentralized revolution plan.
I got a short answer because I guess we're about to finish. Yeah?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. I'm just going to do a short answer. So I wrote a piece last year or something. It's called Bitcoin and Lockdowns. And there's a chart on the top of it. So you don't have to read the whole article unless you want to, but there's a chart on the top which I created, which is basically Bitcoin adoption, Bitcoin supply, Bitcoin issuance schedule, need, want, curiosity, pain. It's a spectrum, and basically you can map against that what Bitcoin adoption will look like. So 100% Bitcoin means 0% fiat, and 0% Bitcoin means 100% fiat. So it's basically they're an inverse chart, and we're nowhere near the crossover point at the moment, but as we get near that crossover point, the switch will happen. Does anyone remember having phones before smartphones? Right? Now we all have smartphones, but we remember a time before, remember a time after, but I don't think anyone remembers the time in between. That time in between kind of came and went way fucking quicker than what anyone expected. So it'll be that same sort of really quick transition. And from a monetary perspective, just to give people some context, we haven't seen the bull market in Bitcoin yet. We'll all be needing to get our brown pants on, like somewhere middle of the decade, because like, get this, this is when the Bitcoin bull market really starts. When we reach sat cent parity, and no one's actually looking at the chart of like Bitcoin price anymore, and when one sat goes from 1 cent to 2 cents, doesn't sound very big, right? Like that'll happen in a day. The price of Bitcoin just went up $1 million in a day. Guarantee you that'll happen before the end of this year, and then it'll go to 3 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents within a very short period of time. So that'll be Bitcoin moving from 1 million to 10 million within a very short period of time. That's the shift. That's when you know things are starting to actually shift. That's the real bull market, and that's when the things start to decay. But to your point, and this is where it gets interesting, is if we can somehow extend it a little bit, it'll just mean less chaos in the shift. If it compresses too much, shit's gonna fly all over the fucking place, man. Like it'll be, we'll probably, I don't know, there's a statistic, I think it's like, what is it, between 14 to 28 days before people become cannibals? Some shit?
Yeah. Yeah, 4 days when trucks stop going to the cities, you don't have food in the grocery stores. 2 weeks, you got people starving. Within a month, you got cannibals.
Yeah,
all the models predict. So,
buy Bitcoin, avoid cannibalism.
That volatility, the way we as a community of people who understand this is happening, the way we make it better for the rest of our world and our own lives. If you look at Weimar, Germany, when it happened, all that volatility and gold wiped out so many people. Just like you're trying to predict the emotion rushing to the top and the bottom, because it flipped so quick, but in that quick, it was just all over the place, right? The ones who made it were the real producers. The farmers just were connected to real value. The machinists, they were just connected to real value. Think in your own personal lives, your own portfolios. Forget about like returns on capital measured by like interest rates and all that as things flip into that chaos. Think in real asset measurements, because Bitcoin's going to go up and down like crazy. You need a backbone of real production of security for people's lives. Then you'll be able to protect society as it kind of flows through you shepherding it and taking care of people and providing for them to lengthen the chaos time. That way we kind of transition to Bitcoin more peacefully.
Beautiful. Thank you.